And good evening, and thanks for joining us again. And we have the great pleasure of having Dr. Randy Smart with us again tonight. And
Hi, John.
Thank you very much. And thank you not only for doing these programs, but thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do in the community. I mean that sincerely.
My pleasure, my mission.
So 2020 has just been another normal year in medicine, right?
Right. Nothing
just
new.
Run of the mill.
Kind of bored.
Yeah.
Not a lot of new diseases. Oh my gosh.
So how is it? I mean, I know, it's been pretty eventful. Even today's news, as far as some of the breakthroughs and stuff like that. So
it's been for a science person, I love science, and for a science person to see a new disease, and new technology, it is really exciting. And it's not exciting to see people hurt or to see morbidity and mortality, but to see science in action. I mean, there are so many things we do every day that maybe the public doesn't know so much about, and that's okay. We're not looking for credit. But to now be in a pandemic, a true pandemic, where you're looking at these breakthroughs every day, and you're looking at some just beautiful work, absolutely beautiful work. It's like being in a candy shop. I mean, I can't get enough of it.
And we were talking before the camera started rolling as well. With the amount of money and attention and intellect that's been thrown at this, this is in some ways kind of like a little bit of a moonshot. It's going to drive, don't you think it's going to have halo effects in medicine? As far as just we're talking about the vaccines, we'll probably get into that later, but as far as the tech behind the Moderna and the Pfizer isn't that?
So we're not talking about collateral damage, we're talking about collateral benefit. And like you say, there's a halo of all these new technologies, new ideas. And really what drives a lot of that is collaboration. So scientists kind of get locked in their labs a little bit with their microscopes and their test tubes, but suddenly they all are brought together to solve a problem.
It's broken down the silo walls.
The silos go away, and they start really talking, and they really, and the kind of the regulatory barriers go away. Regulation is not a good thing for science. It's just not. And so you drop those barriers, and people can say, okay, I can do this in a couple weeks or a couple months, and I can talk to the other guy over in Europe, and we can exchange information. And again, that is
so liability becomes a component, not the component, right?
Correct. Yes. Well said. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah, so it's not only been an interesting year, it's just been, you just can't get enough of it. It's like the World Series of medicine. But we definitely have problems, and I think what most people are concerned about right now is not only the increase in COVID, which I think we all recognize, but the fact that we're entering into our winter season. And as we enter into the winter season, people are more indoors. There tends to be more infections in winter. People get more colds. They get, just a variety of things as a result of that indoor living. And I think they're really concerned when you start mixing things like influenza and COVID. Or should we be worried? What do you guys think? And we should talk about that a little bit.
Do you really see one of the big risks? As the vaccines ramp up, we're still going to have that crossing moment here to where, we could have some bad outcomes the next few months until they really get stuff ramped up, right? Isn't that
bad?
As far as
patient outcomes.
There's the risk of, infection rates and things like that. This next 90 days or so. It's this next 90 days or so until we really start getting on the,
I gave a pep talk at one of our healthcare facilities yesterday, and what I said is, okay, guys, we've been preparing. It's been 8 months. We've got the suits. We've got the masks. We've got all this stuff, and now it's game on, because it's here. And we need to do this right. And I really believe that. You know, in March we weren't sure. Everybody was a little bit spooked, and we were looking at the cruise ships. And then as summer rolled out, we kind of kept observing, thinking about vaccines and other things. But now clearly the epidemiology is striking. The cases are striking locally, statewide, nationwide, and it's game on.
Yeah.
We need to get this right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people are going to really get hurt.
A little bit of the question on that, you know, before the vaccine starts rolling out in large numbers, on the therapeutic side, it looks, if there's one halo, positive at all, it looks like the death rates post-infection, I mean, that number is trending down, correct? I mean, because you know what you're treating now, right? I mean, more so. I mean, isn't it?
Yes, it's trending down not because of a less virulent infection, a mutated virus.
Right.
It's trending down because we're a little bit better at managing this. And I don't mean me, I mean the experts out there are better at managing it. We understand how to ventilate patients with this infection. We understand the blood clot complications, which we didn't understand at first.
Right.
So we've gotten a little bit better at it. But the death rates are not to be minimized.
No. I wasn't saying that.
They're real.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as now that there's more experience with timeline of the virus, now some of the stuff that I've read is that now they know when the virus, when it kicks into a certain phase or something, and what works as it, on the time frame of
Can predict a little bit more about the clinical course.
Right.
This is day 3. This is what we think is going to happen. This is day 5. This is what we know we need to do. So
yes. Something may work on day 3 that's not a good path on day 10, so to speak. Right.
And we've had success with medications. We are using dexamethasone now, which is a kind of a potent steroid that we know at a certain time in the infection can be effective. We have remdesivir, and remdesivir is being produced in higher and higher amounts, more available, more access, and that has made a difference. So we're pulling in all these resources as well as kind of a growing knowledge.
Right.
And we feel good about that. But we have a long ways to go.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be the doomsday guy or paint a dark story. I think we can do this. I think we can absolutely do this. But it's going to take a nation to do this. I mean, it's not going to take a county or a state. We as Americans have to do this.
Yeah.
Maybe even bigger than that, the world. I mean, one of our biggest concerns is these viruses do mutate. We know that influenza, 1918, the Spanish flu. And our biggest worry is that there could be a mutation that either makes it more transmissible, so suddenly maybe the masks don't work as well, or maybe contact transmission is more likely, or that there is a mutation that makes it more virulent, that maybe has a neurological complication or something that we didn't expect. And if you think about it, if you get a mutation like every 1 million times that this virus replicates itself, well, if you think about it, that happens in a patient thousands of times a day in one patient, those million copies. And if you start extrapolating that out to 52 million people, there are billions and billions of replications every day. And just statistically, if you went to a mathematician and said, what are the chances of a mutation? They'd say, man, it's already happened.
Sure.
We just haven't found it yet.
Right.
So we worry about that.
Yeah. As far as local stuff here now, as far as, if we're getting we're suited up and ready to go here locally, what's the state of, what's your sense of how we are doing here locally on it?
Well, I think there are some fundamental differences between urban and rural communities. And I think rural communities in general have an advantage with this because we are a little more separated. We have different lifestyles.
Right.
And so as a rule, just coming out of the gates, I think communities like Calaveras, Tuolumne, Amador, I think they have an advantage. I think we've done really well. I think the public health departments have done really well. There's always that element of fierce independent.
Right.
You're not going to tell me what to do. But for the most part, I see people in this community really getting it right.
I guess the question that kind of needs to be asked a little bit on the like the congregate care settings, you know, the elderly, there was some bad outcomes. Was that a learning thing as well? I mean, now that processes are in place to where you would think that may prevent something like that from happening again, or you just don't know?
No, I think I do know. I just don't like the question.
Okay.
And these skilled nursing facilities.
I phrased it inelegantly. I
apologize. No, it's not that at all. It's just that they are such a setup for this.
Right.
We know this attacks the elderly. We know the morbidity and mortality is higher. We know that those that are vulnerable, those that are in these facilities, and then you know, people are in and out. You know, the workforce is in and out.
Yep.
I mean, it is just such a challenging setup. It's.
I guess I phrase it. I mean, has there been enough on rapid testing for staff? I mean, as far as changes, improvements, and stuff to where you can get a quicker turnaround, so you don't have asymptomatic or something like that for a prolonged period of time. You know, have the improvements been made to where you can shorten that cycle a little bit?
There are.
Okay.
I mean, originally when this started, we were not getting test results for 2 to 3 weeks,
which are meaningless.
Oh, it's throwing money out the window.
Yeah.
And so now we can get test results in about 15 minutes in Calaveras County.
Wow.
I mean, it's called NAT testing. It's an acronym. But that's not the problem. So we can get rapid test turnaround. The problem is the test is not really all that good. What the challenge with this test is what's called false negatives. So we could test you, it could be negative, but you could still have COVID. And the false negatives are really striking. If you time this to the optimal time, which would be about day 4 or 5 of the infection, you would hit about 20-25% false negatives.
Wow.
That's 1 in 4, John.
Right.
Now,
Right.
if you go to day 6 or day 7, you're up to 50% false negatives.
Mm-hmm.
And this was such a disappointment for the medical people in the county, as we had people we knew were positive. I mean, they had just come out of Seattle. They had everything. They had the fever. They had the cough. We said, I don't even know why we're testing them, but we probably should. And then their tests would come back negative. And we go, what? How can? And so we've learned through the summer that this false negative thing is a real problem. And I don't know what's going on in terms of improving that, but it has been real challenging for us. So
it makes your job much harder.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because you can't even play whack-a-mole accurately. I mean,
right. And so if you go back to this, these convalescent facilities and rehab facilities, you can get the test turnaround in 15 minutes. The trouble is, what exactly do you do with the result? I mean, and it gets pretty confusing. And I believe this winter will be, I don't think it'll be challenging for the patients. I think it'll be okay for the patients. I think that's a message I'd like to get out. I don't think they're at an increased risk for dying or for more serious morbidity, particularly with influenza and other diseases. But the people that are going to be really challenged this winter are the medical people.
Right.
Because you could come in and say, Doc,
mm-hmm.
I've got a cough, I've got a temp of 101, I ache everywhere, what do you think it is? And so we go, well, it could be COVID, it could be influenza. We know there's false negatives, and sorting that out for us is going to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a positive test, we'll know.
Right.
You know, positive COVID,
right.
positive influenza, we'll know. But if it can get confusing, and the treatments are different.
A question.
Right.
One of the therapeutics of this last week was the one from Lilly, which to a layperson seems more like a Tamiflu, so to speak, for COVID. Is that something that is, I mean, would help lower some of the viral loads on some of these people to where, you know, you think that they have it, but they're, that one, it looks like what has to be it's intravenous.
Mm-hmm.
So, but is that, am I wrong in saying that it's a similar,
we don't know.
You don't know yet.
We really don't know.
Okay, all right.
We don't know. I don't want to be one of those people that get on a show and spend the entire show saying we don't know.
Right.
But there are things we don't
just
know.
don't know.
We just don't know. What we do know is that COVID and influenza can occur at the same time. We know that. There are several documented cases, many of them out of China.
Wow.
We know that that isn't particularly a sicker patient, that they don't seem to be any sicker than those that only have one of those. So it's not like you get the double whammy. From what we can tell so far, the outcomes for those co-infected patients are about the same.
Which is a good thing,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
As far as lowering people's anxiety levels. Yeah.
Right. And here's what I think is really important, is we get most of our influenza information from the southern hemisphere as influenza moves around the globe.
Right.
And so we get a lot of it out of Australia and South America. And so if you look at influenza in Australia, 2016 up and then down, 2017 up, and every year you can just look at this rise during their winter or summer. At 2020, no rise.
Really?
No rise. No influenza. Not no, but just dramatically lower rates of influenza. So influenza, for the first time, I think in my lifetime, is not occurring in this seasonal sort of epidemic mode that it has always occurred.
Question: do you think that is behavior driven, or because of the virus, or the okay? So you think it's behavior, good behavior driven?
So the expert opinions, which I agree with, are that because we are masking and because we are social distancing, because we are washing our hands, which frankly we should have been doing every winter, but and everybody gets the flu, right? What's the big deal? But because we are doing those things, those curves are just flat, just absolutely flat. So, and I don't want to send the wrong message here. I'm not saying anybody should not get a flu shot or should not be concerned.
Right.
But it really looks like the flu that we normally see every winter may not happen. It may just not happen.
So if you're looking to lower people's apprehension and fear level, then is the cases where they've had combined, the outcome hasn't been statistically that much worse if they have them both. And our behavior now that our COVID behavior, is actually made it so that the flu bump may be a less of a bump, right? Is that
or no bump?
Or no bump.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is what we're seeing. It's sort of been verified in those southern hemisphere target areas. Now flu, influenza typically will affect the southeast U.S. first, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, and then and that's usually about this time of year, and then we can see it slowly move across the country. And we see this every winter, and it slowly moves to the Midwest, and then after Christmas with all the travel, then it's into California, Arizona, and we see that every year. And so the big influenza months for Calaveras County and California tend to be January, February, trying to trickle off a little bit in March.
Yeah.
That's typically what we see. Now, if you look at those southeast states right now, Alabama, Georgia, there's not a lot going on. There's not a lot going on.
Which is a great thing. Huh?
It's pretty early in the process,
right.
but for those of us that are watching, we're going, maybe influenza is not going to be an issue this year. Maybe we can, relax a little bit and just focus on the pandemic and not get overly overwhelmed and overly excited. And I hope that happens. I'm pretty optimistic that'll happen. You don't know till you get there.
A practical question on some of the vaccine stuff. I know that they've been front loading some of the production on it, and I know, you don't know exactly when they're going to have the emergency use authorizations or whatever. But let's assume that it's the next couple weeks or 3 weeks or something like that when they do that. Logistically, what are people realistically, I know some of the that are higher on the risk levels will get access to vaccine first. Probably the front of the line. What are people looking at over the next 90 days or so as far as how things will start?
Yeah, I think what we'll see is we will see the vaccine managed more by government agencies than private organizations.
Okay.
So I think the vaccine distribution and logistics will be managed by public health departments.
Okay.
I have concerns about that because our public health departments, not Calaveras, but everybody, are pretty overwhelmed right now. And to hand them the vaccine assignment too,
right,
could push them over the edge. But I think the current plan is for states, public health, county public health to manage the distribution and the logistics of that. Exactly how they're going to do that, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure also they will prioritize first doses, probably toward first responders, healthcare people, and so when you add all those things up, for you and me, well, you more than me, we're probably not going to have access to a vaccine until March. Or could even be a little bit later. And the other interesting thing that happens is we think things are okay. We think a medicine is okay or a treatment is okay, and we've tested hundreds of patients, but we haven't tested millions. And so when that vaccine is released out into the public, that's when we start going, let's see what happens. And I shouldn't even say that, but it's a fact.
True.
It's what we do.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting stories in influenza vaccines was in 1970s. I think it was 74. Is President Ford approved a swine flu vaccine. And there was a lot of concern about swine flu being particularly fatal and being transmissible with humans. It turned out to not really be true. And the swine flu vaccine had some pretty harmful effects. In particular, a problem called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a kind of a neurological paralysis.
Right.
So everybody had great intentions, but we actually hurt some people. And we didn't realize that until we put out hundreds of thousands of doses. I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't want people to be frightened about this, but we learn a lot when we release it.
Yes.
And I think people would be smart to take it. I believe whatever they take is going to be a 2-dose series, probably 6 months apart. One of my biggest concerns is acceptance. And, my personal sort of take on this is people aren't really trusting government a whole lot right now.
Doesn't seem like
and so because of that lack of trust, now there's a government vaccine, and I think many of them are going to say, I'd like to see how my neighbor does first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let him take it for a while. And so I don't know how strong acceptance is going to be. I think there's going to be some resistance.
Well, I mean, is that something that even in the medical community that you may get some pushback? I mean, as far as, because you're going to probably have to do a mandate for, you know, staff. I mean, you know, how, I mean, you're going to get, I mean, that has some perils as well as far, I mean, management perils as far as, as far as if you do a, you know, okay, everybody roll up their sleeve and let's roll, you know, type of deal.
Right. Are you going to hold somebody down?
Right. Right.
Probably not.
Yeah.
There are going to be lawsuits, probably. But what we do right now with respect to influenza is in a healthcare facility, you're not required to have an influenza vaccination. But if you choose not to, you have to wear a mask 24/7.
Have the
wearing masks 24/7.
Right. Okay.
Right now. Okay. So I don't know. I mean, the healthcare people are a pretty well-behaved group of people, and I think vaccine acceptance will actually be fairly high in that group. But as you get out into the community, I think there's going to be some resistance.
Yeah. Maybe in some rural areas.
Maybe in some rural areas, right, exactly. Exactly.
We just got our 2-minute light on, so I guess as far as a summation, you know, here, what do you want to leave people with as far as status stuff and summation? I mean, how...
Well, I want them to enter the winter period being smart, following the advice of public health, to mask, to social distance, to wash hands. I don't want them to be frightened about influenza or think of this as a dark winter. I think they should get their flu shots. I think when the COVID vaccine is available, they should do that. I think most of them will do fine. And I don't think we have any reason to feel as though we're doomed and we're in trouble. I don't think we are. I think we've got this.
So everybody's got their equipment, they're gowned up, and now it's time it's a 2-minute drill. Let's get this across the finish line, huh?
Game on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, John. It's my pleasure.